So describe your living situation of 2020. You're now back in New York. Uh, what what do you miss most, or what do you like most about being back? And did anything surprise you?
hmm yeah, so when COVID hit in March, I obviously didn't know what the heck was going on, like most people. And the thought of being stuck in downtown Manhattan in my tiny one bedroom just wasn't super exciting. And so I got out of there as quickly as I could and went to Chicago. So the silver lining of the pandemic, or one of them for me, was being able to go back to Chicago and essentially move in with my long distance girlfriend um, and spend a lot of time and get very close with her. So we went from long distance relationship, New York to Chicago, to living together in Chicago, and it made us stronger. It was really great to have somebody to go through that experience with. Obviously, times were tough, but having somebody to be there literally all day every day was nice. And February of this year. I guess like March through like July, I was basically in Chicago, and then after July, I was going back and forth between Chicago and New York. And February of this year, I convinced Kylie to move back to New York, which is where we first met, and started a relationship. And so now we're back in New York full time, but in Brooklyn. So I was in Manhattan, I'm in Brooklyn, and it's great. I love being back. Even during a pandemic, there was a different level of energies between New York and Chicago, and you could feel it. Obviously New York wasn't the exact same pandemic versus pre-pandemic, but you could still feel a shift of energy.
Okay.
Again, coming from like Chicago to New York, and when I came back, it was just like this wave flowing over me again, and it was almost like moving to New York for a second time. I got like jittery and excited, and also doing it with
Yeah.
my girlfriend. That's a huge step, moving cross country. It wasn't a new place for either of us. She had lived here for 5 years. I've been here for 3 years now. Officially joining our lives together, and it was great. It was pretty funny. A few things that surprised me. One was there were times, especially in February, where I wasn't spending a lot of time outside of the apartment, that I forgot I was back in New York. Just because New York like is iconic for its and known for its like super small apartments, right? But the pandemic, there's been this huge move away from cities. People have been moving out to the suburbs or places like Austin or Denver or all these like second, third tier cities. And so for people in New York who've been able to stay here, you've really been able to kind of level up your living situation at such a discounted rate. So we were able to cash in on the COVID rental prices. We moved dead of winter during a pandemic and got a really amazing spot and a big place. And so that's why I still felt like I was in Chicago, because I was in this big space in New York, which is just unheard of. But now with the pandemic, it's crazy. Like, all my friends, coworkers have moved, and everyone is just like leveling up their places because you're getting 3-4 months free rent and discounted monthly rents as well. So another kind of silver lining of a terrible situation. I can't overstate how terrible it's been. But if you're staying in a big city and your lease is up, you get to cash in on a really cheap and nice place, which is what we did. So that was surprising.
So
It's crazy that.
what would you say the difference between living in Brooklyn versus Manhattan is like?
Yeah. So especially downtown Manhattan is it's the densest place in America by a long shot, and it's just so convenient. And Brooklyn, while it's not as dense and it's not as convenient, it's still probably second to Manhattan. So maybe there's only like one bodega on your street as opposed to two or three. Maybe there's only like one pizza spot on your street, or maybe things close like an hour or two sooner, right? So you do get a little bit more space. It isn't as congested. Those are the big things that you immediately notice if you're, let's say, walking around downtown Manhattan, and then you go to even like a Williamsburg, which is the most gentrified at this point. But around where I live, Fort Greene, Prospect Park, downtown Brooklyn, you do have a little bit more space to breathe. Now, if you're coming from another city and you go to Brooklyn, you probably still think, wow, there's so many people, it's so dense. But again, if you're coming from Manhattan to
It's
Brooklyn,
all relative.
you get that. Yeah, exactly. You get more space. Your money goes a little bit farther. But some of that convenience isn't as readily available. For me, I do miss like the slice places in my spot in Chinatown, Lower East Side. I had two really good spots that were walking distance: Scar's Pizza and then Williamsburg Pizza. And my pizza place now is just like not as good, and also closes at like 11 p.m. on weekdays and like midnight on weekends. So
Carlita's been on this program before, and she compares Brooklyn more to Chicago than Manhattan in a way.
Yeah, I could see that, especially the more residential neighborhoods in Brooklyn. So my new neighborhood, Fort Greene, which is really close to Clinton Hill, Bed-Stuy, downtown Brooklyn, is very residential. It's almost like I've thought about this too. In Chicago, maybe it's like the Roscoe Village.
Okay.
So it's very residential, a lot of nice family homes, younger families, but not as stroller heavy as, let's say, like a Lincoln Park, but not as young as like a Lakeview, right? It's that good like balance of younger families, younger couples, but still like great restaurants, great bars, a really nice park that we get to walk to on a daily basis to kind of stretch our legs. It really is a great mix of all those things, and still pretty close to the city. That's the other thing about Brooklyn is it's tough if you like have friends in the city, especially like Upper East, Upper West, or like West Village. It does take some time to commute there. Okay. But everything has its pros and cons. We're really happy with our neighborhood. I can't recommend it enough, and I'm excited to show you around next time you're in town.
Yeah, for sure. So do you ever overhear like sports talk in New York, and what do you hear more about, the Brooklyn Nets or the New York Knicks? We got Thibodeau coaching the Knicks now, who is a former Bulls coach in the Rose years. And we're saying this, I'm asking you this too, a day after my Milwaukee Bucks beat the Brooklyn Nets, and Giannis put up 49 points. So
I saw that. I don't like my friend group. They're not the biggest of sports fans. I do hang out and actually started like a weekly basketball run with some friends, but I'd say it's more like general NBA talk.
Okay.
But from kind of general NBA talk and even like the national consensus, it seems like the Knicks are getting more play. And I think that's just how it's going to be for a long while. The Knicks as a franchise, as a brand, have just so much more going for them.
The brand is bigger than the star power of Brooklyn individually. Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, the Nets are still a relatively new team, and they really haven't had any success up until this year, right?
Yeah. Well, and the Knicks too.
Well, the Knicks have been an iconic franchise forever. Right. I mean, they've been shitty for a while, but at least they have. I mean, it's Madison Square Garden. It's the Knicks. Yeah. They could be the worst team in the league, but like if you get courtside seats to the Knicks, I mean, that's on my bucket list, right? To like sit courtside at a Knicks game, like sitting courtside at a Nets game. Like even if you have like KD, Kyrie, you could have every A-list player in the league, but courtside Knicks, like next to Spike Lee, I mean that's just so much cooler than Barclays and Brooklyn, and they just haven't had the tenure. They don't have the history yet like the
Yeah.
Knicks do. So, and as much as I want to like the Nets, and I live, a 15-minute walk from Barclays, it's still like MSG, man. It's iconic. I mean, that's that's where every NBA
Yeah.
player shows up to play his best game.
Mhm.
Um, and I think if the Nets do pull off the championship this year or next, it's going to do a little bit for the franchise, but it's going to take decades for them to even compete with the Knicks on, let's say, like a brand level and just like the cool factor. Like
So
the Knicks are just,
it's almost the exact same of like Clippers Lakers in a way.
yeah. But
Yeah.
even more so because what's crazy about that is the Clippers and Lakers play in the same arena.
That's true.
So that's kind of crazy that the Lakers are so far ahead of the Clippers. But I mean, also the Lakers are just dominant in terms of championships,
Yeah.
trophies, and star power. The Knicks, they really don't dominate in terms of trophies or
Yeah.
success, but they just dominate in that brand value and in like the coolness. And I can't underscore that enough. Like spikes, courtside, the history, the tradition, even like people coming in there and playing their best games, like
Yeah.
MJ dropping the double nickel, even like James Harden dropping 60 plus. What was that last year, the year before? Everyone just shows up. It really is. I'd say that and Staples, right, is the premier arena, and everyone wants to show up there.
Yeah. And everybody wants to be seen there and stuff. Yeah. For sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Again, like courtside Knicks, like that's for sure a bucket list.
So now that spring's kind of coming into bloom here, is there something that excites you?
Oh, so much excites me. I mean, I feel like everyone is just excited to pop off this spring summer, right? I mean,
Yeah.
roaring 20s, especially New York City. I mean, if you're not excited to get out and try to establish a sense of normalcy and be with your friends and family and just be out and about and enjoy the simple things in life. And this past weekend was probably my most normal weekend since the pandemic, where I wasn't like doing a road trip or something with friends. And it was just like went for a bike ride in Prospect Park, went to the farmers market, went to the park with a group of friends. We just like sat there and just stayed there way too
Yeah.
long, and then kind of meandered about back to Brooklyn and caught up for dinner, like next to the park, sat outside, and it was just like, I'm just excited for those moments. And I think everyone else is, right? I don't think there's anything different about me being in New York than you being in Chicago or somebody else being in rural America. They're excited just to have spring and summer in those moments.
Yeah.
And when you're outside too, you don't see the masks as often. You don't see the social distancing as often. So there is more normalcy to it. And I remember feeling that back last year, spring, summer. So I'm just excited for that. And New York too is just, I feel like there's everyone keeps talking about this pent up demand, this pent up energy, and you can really feel that vibrate across Brooklyn, Manhattan, whatever borough you're in. You can definitely feel it, and people are excited for the spring and summer.